Literary Criticism and Practical Criticism. Essay, English Poetry and the Modern World by F.R. Lewis and M.B. Kint. The objective of this lesson is to introduce the students to the essay English Poetry and the Modern World, and here the students can examine the relationship between poetry and the modern world as analyzed by F.R. Lewis and M.B. Kint. The man himself, F.R. Lewis. Let us have a brief introduction about the author. F.R. Lewis, in full Frank Raymond Lewis. He was born on July 14, 1895 in Cambridge, Cambridgeshire, England, and died on April 14, 1978 in Cambridge. He is an English literary critic who championed seriousness and moral depth in literature and criticized what he considered as the amateur belletrism of his time. Lewis attended Cambridge University and then served throughout World War I as an ambulance bearer on the Western Front. He lectured at Emmanuel College, Cambridge from 1925, but moved in the early 1930s to Downing College, where he was elected into a fellowship in 1936. He retired in 1962 and thereafter served as visiting professor at a number of English universities. In 1967, he delivered the Clarke Lectures at Trinity College, Cambridge, which was published in 1969 as English Literature in Our Time and the University. He was made a Champion of Honor in 1978. Okay, so here we must understand he emphasizes on two things. He is somebody who introduced seriousness, and he is also somebody who speaks about the moral depth in all the literary works. And for him, any good piece of literary work will have a rich moral content in it. If it does not reflect rich moral content in it, then it is considered to be of not great standard. And he insisted that evaluation as a critic, his evaluation works should be, the principal concern of evaluation of criticism is that it must ensure that English literature should be a living reality operating as an informing spirit in the society, and that criticism should involve the shaping of contemporary sensibility. Lewis refused to separate art from life, or the aesthetic or the formal from the moral. He insisted that all the great novelists' preoccupation with form was a matter of responsibility towards a rich moral interest. Okay, New Bearings in English Poetry was the first major volume of criticism by Lewis that highlighted his own critical understandings about literature and art. There was lots of similarities between Lewis and new critics. Now, who are these new critics? Cleanth Brooks, Carton, Evon, Greff Gerald, Rene, John Paul. There are some to name the new critics. Now, what is new criticism all about? New criticism was a formalist movement in literary theory that dominated American literary criticism in the middle decades of 20th century. It focuses on the importance of close reading of a piece of literature, mainly poetry, to understand how it functions as a self-contained object. And this concept was introduced by John Crowe Ransom. Okay. So having said that, he has a lot of similarities with the new critics because both take the artistic or the creative work as the primary focus of study, analysis, and discussion. Yet, Lewis is clearly unique since he never assumed that the theory of art as a self-contained, self-creative, and a formal artifact isolated from the society, culture, and traditions from which it emerged. Lewis, so this is what he says, about the similarities and also the difference, why he is unique when it comes to him being compared to new critics. Okay, so he never considered them to be self-contained or self-creative, which can be isolated from the society or culture or tradition from which the literary work evolves. Okay, and having said, his criticism can be grouped into 4 stages. So early publications and essays, including New Bearings in English Poetry, which was published in around 1932, and Revaluation, which came out in 1936. They're concerned primarily with re-examining poetry from 17th to 20th centuries under the strong influence of T.S. Eliot. So students, you must observe that even this particular essay, New Bearings in English Poetry, it concerns with re-examining the poetry from 17th to 20th century. And here we can see the strong influence of T.S. Eliot on F.R. Lewis. And then he moved to fictions and novels. Okay, the works like The Great Tradition, which came out in 1948, and D.H. Lawrence Novelist, which was published in 1955. And in the third period, Lewis took up complex treatment of literary, educational and social issues. And this was most visible in his work, Nor Shall My Sword, which was brought out in 1972. And the last stage consisted of his critical sentiments during final years of his life. Those could be read in The Living Principle, English as a Discipline of Thought, which came out in 1975, and Thought, Words of Creativity, Art and Thought in Lawrence, which was published in 1976. So this is about, the introduction to the author. So let us now understand the context. Okay, this essay is taken from the first chapter, Poetry and Modern World, of the book, New Bearings in English Poetry, which was penned by Lewis himself and which explains that poetry has declined in the modern world. That is, very little of contemporary intelligence concerns itself with poetry. Within the essay, Lewis presents his views on the development of Eliot's insight and taste against Victorian poets, modified by his own moral and cultural preoccupations. In the prefatory note, he writes, "It is largely an acknowledgement, vicarious as well as personal, of indebtedness to a certain critic and poet, and this certain critic is T.S. Eliot, with whose concept of tradition Lewis largely agrees." So students, just to brief you about Eliot's idea of tradition, it goes like this. Eliot maintains that tradition is bound up with historical sense, which is a perception that the past is not something lost and invalid. According to Eliot, tradition is a living culture which is inherited from the past and also has an important function in framing or shaping the present. So this was a brief idea about T.S. Eliot's view on tradition, where he says that past is not completely, invalid. So the present and the past are knit together. Okay. So we understand he acknowledges him a lot throughout his works. And Lewis established the significance of a writer by applying a number of criteria. Okay. And the most important of which is the use of words. He says that he confines himself as strictly as possible to the analysis of language because poetry is made of words. His trust in the analysis of language used by a writer is understandable because he equates language with culture. He attributes the plight of poetry with cultural decline, which made it difficult for 20th century to preserve the central tradition of poetry. He also blames Arnold for sharing view that poetry is simple, sensuous, and passionate. He says in Essays in Criticism, though they may write in verse, though they may a certain sense be masters of the art of verification, Dryden and Pope are not classics of our poetry, they are classics of our prose. Their poetry is conceived and composed in their wits. Genuine poetry is conceived and composed in their soul. He mentions two anthologies, Selection from Modern Poets by J.C. Square and 20th Century Poetry by Harold Munro, and refers to the statements made by both the anthologists in supportive of his views. Lewis sharply attacks the poems of the anthologies and finds that the words on the page have no roots and that the writer himself is not more than superficially interested in them. He is not of the view that the number of potential poet varies from age to age, as literary history might lead on to one to suppose. I'll quote here. What varies is the use made of talent, and the use each age makes of its crops of talent is determined largely by the preoccupations of the poetical, that are current and the corresponding habits, conventions, and the techniques, unquote. So what he means here is that the definition of what constitutes the poetical is ultimately shaped by culture. Okay, so we have understood that along when he applies number of criteria, he gives importance to the word usage of the selection of the words, and also a great emphasis on the usage of the language, because language reflects culture of the writer. Okay, so this is about what he says about literary things. And moving further, once again, to recap of what we discussed so far, we should understand that this particular essay is fetched from one of his own creations, New Bearings in English Poetry. Lewis admits that T.S. Eliot has become a public institution as his works had its effect upon all the difficulties of his age. And Lewis equates language with culture and blames Arnold for using language without a solid base nor a roof. And he also says that it's the recession in culture that has resulted in the drop of poetic tradition. He is of the opinion that verses addressed to be classics aren't so, for they are outputs of writer's wit alone, while genuine and rich poems are products drawn from an author's soul. See, this is what is very important for him. Mere display of wit or intellect in the poem would not be of great value until and unless it is derived something right out from their soul. Okay? Here, moving further, we understand that he highlights the characteristics of the 19th century. Okay? With reference to some well-known and representative poems like La Bella Dame Sans Mercy, The Lady of Shalott, The Blessed Demoiselle, The Nymph's Song of Hylas, A Forsaken Garden, Hoche Agnes's Ode. Lewis also refers to the Odyssey, a sonnet by Andrew Lang. He calls him a scholar and a man of taste with a feeling for language and a desire to write poetry with. In short, all the qualification of a genuine poet. The malice, I quote here, the malice, to understand the meaning of malice is simply this, that it's a feeling of weakness or a feeling of discomfort, or feeling of overall weakness, a feeling that, you're likely to have an illness. Okay, so it's simply something which simply is not feeling well. Okay, so he says, the malice Lewis detects in the contemporary modern poetry, according to him, was established in the period of great romantics, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, and Keats, whose power consists largely in their negative capability and undefined poetic meaning. So he blames even the romantics. Okay, he calls them to be, something of their negative capability and the undefined poetic meaning. Okay. Now, what is this negative capability? See, negative capability is a phrase first used by Romantic poet John Keats in 1817 to explain the capacity of the greatest writers, particularly Shakespeare, to pursue a vision of artistic beauty even when it leads them into intellectual confusion and uncertainty, as opposed to a preference for physiological certainty over artistic concerns. Okay, that is what negative capability is all about. So here he opposed them. He opposed the romantics because of their negative capability and undefined poetic meaning. And hence, on the whole, he does not consider romantic poetry to be representative of the central tradition of poetry. Tradition is a creative interaction between the past and the present. He traces the early formulation of these preconceptions in order to bring out the significance of modern poetry. For Lewis, technique is very important in poetry. Technique shows the moral sense of a writer. In the prevailing atmosphere, the invention of a new technique was possible only by an unusually powerful and original talent, he feels. And that who could that be? The original poetic talent, according to him, was the one who finally emerges in the form of T.S. Eliot, whose poetry unquestionably reveals that English poetry in future must, if at all it will, develop all along with the other art forms through soulful authors from different from the Romantics as well as Tennyson, Swinburne, and Rupert Brooke. Thus, Lewis anticipated a new serious start and established new bearings. So this is the connection to the title here. So he expected some new original talent to emerge, which is unlike the Romantics or the great poets like Tennyson, Swinburne, and Rupert Brooke. Okay, that is where he anticipates a serious start. Okay, and that is why he established a new bearing. So in order to put the significance of T.S. Eliot in proper perspective, Lewis says it is necessary to examine the situation at the end of the First World War, and he condensed W.B. Yeats' thoughts from his essay. In my heart, I thought that only beautiful things should be painted, and that only ancient things and stuff of dreams were beautiful. For this, Lewis comments, I quote, "Modern thought and the modern world are unfriendly to the hopes of heart, emotions, the delight of the senses and the imagination plainly, and as a result are being rejected in the name of poetry and life." It's such, unquote, it's such a wonderful way of putting across why there is decline, because modern men are so incapable of experiencing their own emotions. They don't know the delight of senses or imaginations and all. For everything, they become scientific, they are very logical and such things. So that is why there is a decline in the poetical interest. Okay. And Lewis presents Walter de la Mare in comparison with Yeats. Okay. He finds de la Mare's poetry peculiarly related to childhood, as he exploits the fairy tale atmosphere. Glamour, mystery, and wonder are the key words with which the effect of Mare's poetry can be described. He is frank about the aim of poetry and his relation with childhood. He finds the modern world with its science and its civilization as uncongenial as Yeats found it. This is a symptom of cultural deterioration which cannot be cured, according to Mare. For this, Lewis comments, I quote, "Mare's poetry then is by admission a poetry of withdrawal, cultivating a special poetical reality. His world of dreams, nourished upon memories of childhood, is for him the intrinsically poetical," unquote. So Lewis also writes, "Urban conditions, a sophisticated civilization, rapid change, and the mingling of cultures have destroyed the old rhythm and habits, and nothing adequate has taken their place." So he's having such clarity when he is justifying his stance. He says that why there is deterioration, because of the urban kind of conditions, a sophisticated civilization. There are lots of changes happening overnight. So we are in this rapid change society, and we also see in this era the mingling of cultures. So all these things have destroyed the rhythm of what we call as the traditional form of poetry. Okay, that is what he says. So these conditions, of course, partly account for the weakness of poetry in recent times. And Lewis compares Mare with Thomas Hardy. He says that in his work, The Veil, Mare recognizes the vanity of his poetic evasions. The poem shows traces of Hardy's influence, but both the poets are unlike each other. The contrast is evident if a comparison is made between The Ghost, the title of the book, and The Voice. Again, it is the title. The Voice evokes the emptiness of utter loss. It has no incantation. It does, it does what it says and presents only the fact recognized by a mind usually responsible and awake. Hardy is a Victorian with a pessimist outlook on life. He sincerely accepts that nature is indifferent to human values. His response has a purity and integrity. He does not strike heroic postures. He inhabits a solid world. He, however, lacks in the technique that could be stopped by the younger poets. Hardy is occasionally deeply moved. This bent are particular evocations of utter loss, the blindness of chance, the poignancy of love, and its helplessness and the cruelty of time. Hardy was a countryman who believed in simple pieties, quiet rhythms, and immemorial rituals of rustic life. But all the things have disappeared from the modern poetic sense. Discussing Georgian poetry, F.R. Lewis says that it suffers from a false simplicity. Oral Stevenson is unreasonably supposed to be a strong influence in German verses, but Rupert Brooke is the dominating figure of this school. He has considerable personal force and is himself an influence. This poetry shows a genuine consciousness. There was a determination among the Georgian poets to modernize poetry and bring it closer to life, and John Masefield was notorious for his realism. He tried to reconcile the sordid facts of life with the rosy mists of poets' experience. Later on, more attempts were made by J.C. Square to escape from the poetical, but they show only the bankruptcy of tradition and the difficulty of new start. So the central group of Georgian poets specialized in country sentiment and the pursuit of beauty. Edward Thompson, according to Lewis, is a very original poet. His poems record the impression and sensations of a moment of relaxed consciousness, modern disintegration, and the sense of directlessness. Further, Lewis mentions three poets, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, and Isaac Rosenberg, in short, and discusses imagism. Now, please have an idea about what imagism is all about. Imagism was born in England and America in the early 20th century, a reactionary movement against Romanticism and Victorian poetry. Imagism emphasized simplicity, clarity of expression, and precision through the use of exacting visual images. Okay, and it is believed Ezra Pound is noted as the founder of imagism. Okay, so okay. Now, so here, what we have discussed that he, however, lacks in the technique and could not and he could not be adopted by younger poets. This is something he's trying to say about the Victorians. And Hardy, he finds that he's occasionally deeply moved, and the bent suddenly turns into his strength and becomes an intensely personal virtue. And his poems are particular evocations of utter loss and the blindness of chance and the poignancy of love and its helplessness and the cruelty of time. Okay. Moving further, after he comments about the Georgian poet, he says, there was a determination among the Georgian poets to modernize poetry and bring it closer to life, and John Masefield was notorious in his realism. Okay, and he tried to reconcile the sordid facts of life with the rosy mists of poetic experience. Later on, more attempts were made by J.C. Square to escape from the poetical, but they show only the bankruptcy of tradition and the difficulty of a new start. The central group of Georgian poets specialized in country sentiment and the pursuit of beauty. Edward Thomas, according to Lewis, is a very original poet. His poems record the impression of sensation of a moment and relaxed consciousness, modern disintegration, and the sense of directlessness. Further, Lewis mentions three poets, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, and Isaac Rosenberg, in short, and discusses imagism. He thinks that imagism belongs to the history of publicity rather than of poetry. Finally, he takes up Robert Bridges' the Testament of Beauty. He observes that its verse are scholarly and original but dead. All the poets discussed above hardly constitute any challenge to the 19th century poetic tradition. Okay. Now, let us move further while observing. So, in what context are we discussing now the main trends of modern poetry? We are focusing on what F.R. Lewis speaks about the main trends of modern poetry. So, with the publication of Eliot's volume of poems in 1909, between 1909 and 1925, the situation changes. Prufrock, its earliest selection dated 1917, constitutes an important event in the history of English poetry. The title poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, represents a complete break with the 19th century tradition and a new start. It defines the tradition and canon by which a seriousness and revises the idea of the distinction between seriousness and frivolity. The subtlety and flexibility of tone, the complexity of attitude, and the nature of imagery are striking. Lewis goes on to say, the canon of the poetical are forgotten. The poet assumes the right to make use of any materials that seem to him significant. The modes of experience, we have here in short poetry that expresses freely a modern sensibility, the ways of feeling, the modes of experience, and one of fully alive of his own age. Already the technical achievement is such as to be rich in promise of development and application, yet the poem suffers from certain defects. A couple of lines contain gestures that are those of caricature and emphasize the touch of conscious elegance in the dissolution, which appears clever, and Eliot was of the opinion that with the end of Chapman, Middleton, Webster, Turner, Donne, there ends a period when the intellect was immediate at the tip of senses. Sensation was word and word was sensation. It expresses psychological subtleties and complexities in imagery of varied richness and realization, qualities that had been absent from English poetry since the period that Eliot describes reappear with him. He launches into an extended simile in which poetry is like an insatiable actor. Poetry enacts different roles and responsibilities in different age. Lewis discusses the effect of Milton on English poetry, keeping in mind Eliot's critical references. Lewis says that poets of 19th century followed Milton rather than Shakespeare in writing blank verse, even when they intended it to be dramatic. Even if Shakespeare was consciously the model language was used in Miltonic way, even in un-Miltonic verse. By the phrase, a generally Miltonic way, Lewis means Milton's habit of exploiting language as a mutual medium outside himself, as it were. Lewis highlights the characteristics changes of 19th century modern poetry with reference to some well-known and representative poems. Okay, and the nymph song of Hylas, A Forsaken Garden, O Agnes's Hoard, those are characteristically preoccupied with the creation of dreams world or imagination. Dreams, the characters are so dominant with the set of ideas, attitudes, and sentiments of 19th century or modern world, that they seem to be present even when they are not avowed or even consciously entertained. Lewis further shows that the relationship between poetry and the age, if the poetry and intelligence of the age lose touch with each other, poetry will cease to matter much and the age will be lacking in finer awareness. He realizes that poetry trends in every age to confine itself with the age's poetical ideas. Lewis says, poetry matters because poet who is more alive than the other people, more alive in his own age, at the most conscious of the race in his time, the potentialities of human experiences in any age are realized through a poet because he belongs to them and also he has the power of communication. As the poet expresses the potential experiences of an age, he naturally takes recourse to the words. Lewis says that he is a poet because his interest in his experience is not separable from his interest in words, because of his habit of seeking by the evocative use of words to sharpen his awareness and his ways of feeling, so making these communicable. Modern creations of W.B. Yeats began to show changes. They aren't dreamy and belong to the actual working world. It is written in the idiom and the movement of modern speech. It is spare, hard, and sinew. Its tone is sardonic. It expresses the bitterness and disillusion of a man who has struggled much. Yeats thereby realized the true world. So Yeats' poetry of the later phase is a remarkable positive achievement, according to Lewis. His verse shows certain qualities of metaphysical poetry as well. Along with age, there was an evident trend or change in literary creations. Okay, so this is all we needed to discuss about what F.R. Lewis has to say about this modern tradition or modern world and English poetry. So let us just have one small call it a revision of the whole thing or a recap of the whole thing here. The essay English Poetry and the Modern World by F.R. Lewis and M.B. Kench is fetched from one of Lewis's work, The New Bearing in English Poetry, Chapter 1. Lewis argues that T.S. Eliot has become a public institution as his work had its effect upon the difficulties of his age. Lewis equates language with culture and blames that it's the recession in culture that resulted in the drop of poetic tradition. He is of the opinion that creations addressed as classic aren't so, for they are products derived out of wit alone, while genuine and rich poems are products drawn from the soul. Lewis highlights the characteristics of 19th century poetry with reference to some well-known poets and representative poems. According to him, imperfections in poetry was implanted in the period of great romantics like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, and Keats, whose power consists largely in their being indefinite and undefined. Lewis is of the opinion that modern thought and the modern world are unfriendly to the hopes, emotions, delight of heart and senses and imagination. As a result, they are rejected in the name of poetry and life. Urban conditions, a sophisticated civilization, rapid change, and the mingling of cultures have destroyed the old rhythms and habits, which is a solid evidence for cultural deterioration. Lewis also compares authors along with their works and emphasizes the influence of personal happenings in a rhythmical creation, and he also stresses upon the elements appreciated in genuine poets' verses. A serious trend was evidently witnessed in literary tradition after the publishing of T.S. Eliot's volumes of poetry. Dreamlike characters are so dominant with the set affidous attitudes and sentiments of 19th century. Human experience in any age are evidently revealed through a poet because he belongs to them and also has the power of communication. Authors began to use idioms and movements of modern speech to express the bitterness and disillusion of an individual who has struggled much. That is the true world.